Hello, and thank you for watching the 2022 Fall Legislative Forums, hosted by the Ashland Chamber of Commerce. I'm Gary Blake, President of the Ashland Chamber, General Manager of Recology Ashland, and Chair of the Chamber Legislative Committee. Moderating the discussion with me is Ann Robison, co-owner of the Crown Jewel and Chamber Board member. Tonight, we will be introducing two uncontested races for Parks Commission. They are Jim Bachman, position number 3, and Rick Lant, position number 5. Each year, the Ashland Chamber hosts legislative forums. This year, we are also hosting forums in addition to the City Council for Parks Commissions, Jackson County Commissioners, State Representatives, and State Senator. The forum is being recorded and will air on local community television, the RVTV website, and the Ashland Chamber's website, along with additional election information at ashlandchamber.com. A few words about what the Ashland Chamber of Commerce is and what we do. The Ashland Chamber and Travel Ashland work year-round to improve the economy, support our businesses, and enhance the quality of life. Over 450 businesses are members of the Chamber, representing thousands of employees and jobs. We are a nonpartisan, private, nonprofit, mutual benefit corporation providing forums such as these featuring candidates for elected offices. We do not have a political action committee or endorse any candidates for any race. We have many strong community partners in addition to our businesses, including SOU, the Ashland School District, OSF, Asante Ashland Community Hospital, and of course, the City of Ashland. We organize, fund, and coordinate the long-standing and beloved community parades and celebrations, including the 4th of July, Children's Halloween Parade, and the Festival of Light celebration, including lighting and decorating the entire town and Santa's Parade. The tourism branch of the Ashland Chamber is Travel Ashland, that inspires, attracts, and welcomes visitors with year-round, multi-platform marketing campaigns. In the last few years, Travel Ashland has rebranded and is successfully expanding into new markets and attracting new visitors in the outdoor, wine, and culinary tourism segments, garnering strong engagement in key markets on the West Coast and beyond. The Chamber is the lead economic development agency for new and expanding businesses. We have just completed an economic diversification research and analysis study that will lead Ashland forward to tackle economic issues and create new initiatives. Finally, the Chamber serves as the main point of contact for businesses looking for assistance with expansion, relocation, problem mitigation, and resource connections. Regarding the forum, each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement to discuss why are they running for their position and what skills and accomplishments qualify them to serve as an Oregon elected official. Following the opening remarks, candidates will be asked a series of questions with 3 minutes to respond. A bell will ring when candidates have 30 seconds and then 10 seconds remaining. Follow-up questions will be kept at 2 minutes. If there is time, they can give a 2-minute closing statement. They must adhere to this time restraint. Additionally, each candidate had to sign a consent form in order to participate. We require that candidates refrain from any form of speech that includes profanity, obscenity, hate, racism, or vulgarity, or that is insulting or offensive to any ethnic, religious, political, or other identifiable group or individual as determined by the forum moderator. A violation of this rule will cause the candidate to be removed from the forum. We expect and will insist on respectful behavior. If time allows, we may have follow-up questions for the candidates, in which case candidates will have 2 minutes to respond, again using the bell system. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ann.
We'll start with opening statements and take about 2 minutes to answer the question, why are you running? and briefly discuss your skills and accomplishments that qualify you to serve as Ashland Parks Commissioner. And we'll start with Jim.
Thank you. I have been enjoying Ashland and Lithia Park in particular since 1969, when my family moved up to Northern California and I ended up graduating from Wairika High School. So when it came to retirement, my wife and I, who had been visiting, decided to move up here, and we've been here 8 years, and took an immediate interest in the goings-on at Ashland Parks and Rec Commission meetings, just trying to learn about the political atmosphere in Ashland. I was appointed to an open position earlier this year by the council, elected by the council, but basically an appointment, and decided I wanted to continue on for a full 4-year term so that I could influence how the parks are managed. Prior to that, I was on the Ashland Citizens Budget Committee, also learning about the city for 2 budget seasons. So I understood the budget, and I wanted to bring that to the Ashland Parks Commission as well. I love parks. I love publicly owned lands. Spend a lot of time outdoors, and I think it's very important that we have stewardship that has an unlimited forward-looking horizon. In other words, in perpetuity, all of our land should stay public to be enjoyed by everyone. So I want to be part of that effort.
Thanks. Go ahead, Rick.
I've always been attracted to the outdoors. I grew up in Oregon, in the Willamette Valley, and actually in the country. And from a young age, I explored the creeks and rivers and mountains. In fact, when I was still a teenager, I solo climbed the South Sister. And I just have always been involved in the outdoors. And then as years went by, I formalized some of that by becoming a permaculture designer, and I was a graduate of Southern Oregon State College, and then worked as an environmental planner. And so all these things have just led me to wanting to give back by supporting and enhancing our local parks. Because what I found is, at a younger age, I was involved in big global kind of issues, and I found it was really hard to have much of a effect. But locally, it was much easier, and I'm proud of some of the things that I've been involved in. I was a primary author of the Parks and Open Space chapter of the city's comprehensive plan, which still hasn't been rewritten since I wrote it in the late 80s. And I'm worried about our parks now. I've been on the commission since 2010, and I have real concerns for that we lose out to essential services like fire and police, and when the budget needs to be cut, it's coming out of our budget, and I'm hoping to help steer us in a more positive direction.
Thank you both. We'll alternate between who goes first in these questions. So we'll begin with our first question here. And Rick, we're going to go back to you on this one. Do you think parks are important to the Ashland economy? And if so, how?
Boy, of course they're important to the economy. Lithia Park is known for sure regionally and in many ways nationally. It's I think Oregon Shakespeare Festival and Lithia Park commingle in a lot of ways. I think that people want to stroll through the park before and after a theater or a movie or a dinner. It's really a focus of and an economic driver, and that's why it's really something we're in the process of doing, which is completing the Lithia Park master plan. Is really important to that effort. Stay tuned, but that will be completed in, I'm hoping within another year, and that should help guide us for the next 100 years with Lithia Park. And but I think there's more. People from all over the valley come to Lithia Park, but there also are other parts of that. There's the Nature Center, there's the ball fields at Hunter Park and North Mountain Park, all these drawing people from other places. And that's what makes them part of that economic driver, although the big one is clearly Lithia Park.
Great, thank you. Jim, it's going to be the same question for you. Do you think parks are important to the Ashland economy? And if so, how?
Well, I'm not going to be able to add too much to what Rick said, but I'll emphasize a few things. By the way, Rick is our chairman, so he's in a position to drive those schedules, and I appreciate that we're going to be completing that plan soon. And I would also note that it's a 100-year plan. We look way out into the future when we're thinking about these lands. As I said earlier, I spent time here as a high school junior in Lithia Park, walking around with my buddies, and I loved it then, and I still love it. It is the gem of Ashland, and I agree with Rick that once people have been here, if they weren't aware of it before, they will be aware of it, and they will return to it. We know that lots of folks come from the valley to come here just to spend the day in Ashland and walk the park. I walk the park regularly, just a part of my exercise program. It's just a lovely place to be. Anything that draws people into Ashland for a day or a weekend or a week or all through the OSF season is going to help our economy. There's no doubt that it's a driver. So, and as Rick says, the other parks have some influence on that. Lithia is clear winner, but in terms of more local travel, say a baseball tournament or something, then our other parks come into play as well. I don't think people visit from Illinois to go to a high school or a Little League game at the park, at the Little League, not Little League, but baseball fields. But I do know that people come from the area to do it. So, and that any money coming, any economic activity coming into Ashland for any reason is beneficial.
Great.
Okay, and we'll start with Jim again this time. What do you think have been some of the biggest successes of the Parks Department, and what do you want to improve upon?
I think that meeting the mandate to have a neighborhood park within a quarter mile of everyone is a very big deal for people who live here. Lithia Park also, but it's the little parks nearby that get a lot of use. I have Railroad Park within easy walking distance, and we go through there every day. And I was talking to some other people recently, and they mentioned parks that most people don't know exist, but they frequent them and they take their grandchildren there. So that is a big deal. We're a small town that had a very firm commitment to having open green spots around the whole city. So I think that is quite an achievement and is pretty much wrapped up. Now it's just a matter of taking care of what we have. So I think the next step is to consolidate. We have another park to build on East Main, which I think is going to be a fabulous thing for that neighborhood. And then just work on being properly funded, which is a little bit of a stretch right now. We're scrambling to be funded. It's hard to do what we view as our minimum maintenance job right now because of the cutbacks at the city. So we need to consolidate, lock in predictable cash flow so that we can take care of all of this stuff. Because we can get capital money to build things, but the ongoing maintenance is an operating item, and that budget is stretched. Well,
I'll start by adding on to something that Jim said. I agree that a park within a quarter mile was aspirational, and it's actually, at this point, it's it's virtually been accomplished at this point. And that's something really to cheer, to celebrate. There's something that, and the reasons, obviously, for people to walk the park is great. It helps, cuts down on transportation. People don't have to go far to find that space. But there's something that sometimes gets missed, and that's the equity issue. In most cities, what happens is, and it was somewhat true for Ashland too, although Lithia Park did come into the heart of the town, but what happens is the parks tend to be up on the hill. It's the land that's, it's the land hasn't been developed, so it's the land that it's easier to find for parks. And so typically you have the up on the hill parks, and then down in the lowlands, there aren't a lot of parks. And that's a typical archetype for how parks are distributed. But that's not true in Ashland. We have parks distributed throughout the town because of that quarter-mile goal that's been accomplished. And I think that's something to really be proud of, the fact that the single mom going to school with a little kid at home has a park to go to, even though she lives in an apartment in a part of town that typically wouldn't have a lot of parks. She's got a park to go to. But I think I want to go back to, I missed read your question again, please.
Certainly. What do you think have been some of the biggest successes of the Parks Department, and what do you want to improve upon? Okay, successes. I think the Japanese garden renovation has to be mentioned. Guanajuato Way renovation that happened, it was really kind of getting a little long in the tooth. The surface there was uneven, it was unsafe, had been dug up for this utility and that, and now putting in that new surface there has really, I think, been a real plus. Also, I think the new splash pad at Garfield Park is a real plus. I think it's something that we really should be proud of. And other thing that's a little bit under the radar is there's been a lot of work by the Parks Department for fire mitigation. We've purchased property in conjunction with the city fire department, but really maybe it had a trail going through it, but it also had the potential to help with fire mitigation. And once it got in city ownership, then it was cleared, not cleared, but it was the underbrush was cleared out, and some places are, anyway, it's just become more fire resistant. And since the Alameda fire, 30 acres of blackberries have been removed. That's another plus. I could go on, but my time's up, so I'll stop.
All right, well, thank you. So Rick, we'll go back to you with our next question. As you know, there is a ballot initiative that may affect Parks and Commission's role. What do you believe are the positives and the negatives of each course of action?
Well, actually, there are two ballot measures that have a significant effect on parks. Ballot measure 15210 would change the city charter, and frankly, that's a pretty big step to take for what, in my mind, is a small problem that could be worked out through memorandums of agreement and stronger human resources policies. So that's, I don't frankly see an upside to having basically two bosses for the parks director. I think it's going to be a disaster. You've got, after this, if this measure were to pass, 15210, the city charter amendment, the Ashland Parks and Recreation Commissioners would still have, per city charter, that wouldn't be changed, management and control of parks. But the parks director would be overseen and hired, fired, pay raises, etc. would be, the city manager would be the one that would be have that control. And the city council, as they've shown, have gotten involved in really minutia of parks issues where they've had an opportunity. And I think that they would be pressuring city manager to do things that were in contrary to what the direction that was from the Parks Commission. So you have this parks director in the untenable position of having two bosses. This wasn't well thought out. It was kind of a knee-jerk reaction, in my opinion, to a small problem. And I don't want to see us having to live with that.
Okay.
There was then there's also 15-211, and that is talks about where the funding for food and beverage money goes. Right now, Parks gets 25% of it, and has traditionally gotten that for the acquisition, development, and renovation of parks. So that isn't that wouldn't change. But originally, it was voted on by voters. It was going to be it was just for parks. It was only a 1 cent tax to begin with. Then the 4 cents went to 4 cents went to sewage treatment. That's no longer needed. Then it was moved over to streets, and now that's not needed for streets. And so the money is kind of available. But the options are, the way that the measure would just have it basically for anything in the operating budget for the whole city that the city manager deems useful for. And I think the Parks Commissioners have, by past votes, have said, we think that money should be used for operating expenses for parks and reduce dollar for dollar what we get from property taxes. Because the property tax money has been in many ways less stable than the food and beverage, even though food and beverage went down during the pandemic.
Thank you. Jim, same question to you. As you know, there's a ballot initiative that may affect parks and commission roles. What do you believe are the positives and negatives of each course of action?
Okay, I'll start right where Rick ended. I was vice chair of the budget committee during the last cycle, and we recommended to the city council that they adopt the then city manager's proposal to actually have all of the food and beverage tax go to parks in the second year of the biennium, because we recognized that parks needed to be funded. And that the city manager came in, disagreed, just has a different opinion about some legal issues associated with that were basically contrary to our legal counsel when I was on the budget committee, and actually the current, at the time he recommended it, our city attorney then didn't agree with him. So there's that initial controversy, but and so he's the one that proposed the current measure, 15-211, which would make all of the money discretionary for the council to decide where to spend it. So that, when I mentioned early on in the conversation here that we are trying to lock in funding, that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. We would prefer to know how much money's coming, not to be held in suspense during the budget process, because we have to plan and to take care of our properties. And then I'll go back to the first initiative Rick talked about, 15-210. It would, in my opinion, essentially end the APRC because of what Rick talked about, and it's true. One could imagine a situation where the two bodies were both elected bodies, the council and the commission, and it have some sort of status by being chosen separately by the voters. But the budget piece puts us at a great disadvantage when it comes to asking for resources from the city, because they control the purse strings. If our personnel are reporting directly to the city manager, I'd ask everybody to try to imagine how we could exert any control really over policy. So it functionally would end, I think, the APRC as a viable administrative body, and it would also lead to constant friction. And I think I'm just reiterating what Rick said. It's not a good model for a united Ashland. We have too much divisiveness now, and this isn't going to help.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Now it's time for closing statements, and you each have 2 minutes. And Jim, you could start this time.
Well, I am excited to be involved in this crossroads area we are now in because of our new city management model, which we voted in last election to have a strong city manager and a weaker mayor. The way that's playing out in terms of parks is that we're fighting for our survival as an independent policymaker. It is my opinion that the mission of parks, which is long-term, as I said, we have a 100-year horizon in some of our planning, we're focused on that. And initially it was just parks, and then recreation and the senior center came to us because the city asked us to manage those things. But that was a council decision, that's not in the charter. So that can go back and forth, but the parks is still tied up for us to manage in the charter. So the charter would need to be changed for that, and nobody asked to do that this round. But I think you can see how difficult it would be to manage in that situation. And so I was excited to come on board right in the middle of this and to be able to play a part in trying to hang on to park stewardship by the Parks Commission. That's my goal.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
2 minutes for closing statement.
I guess I want to go back in history a bit to the Women's Civic Improvement Club in 1908, and they did something that was really, at the time, was actually revolutionary. It wasn't being done elsewhere, which was they said, "Hey, we want parks," and Lithia Park was at that point was not under public ownership. We want a body that's going to take care of it, and they got written into the city charter a park commission, elected park commission, which is rare, and they also got written in a dedicated funding source. And if you ever heard about 209, that 209 is a derivative of that original funding source. And so what they actually did is decades before it became state law, they basically formed a district, which now in this day and age, many of the most successful Oregon park systems are districts. Why? Because they don't have to compete with fire, police, and other essential services. They have their own funding source, and if people want a good park system, they're insured of that. And then what happened was in the 90s, state law changed, and that dedicated funding source was no longer available. There was what was called a gentleman's agreement, which was in effect for about 20 years, where the council said, "Hey, parks, we don't have to give it this because it goes through a budget process, but we're going to give it to you. We're going to give you that 209 because we think parks are important." And that general agreement was kept in place until just a few years ago, and ever since we've been seeing increases in the costs that we have to pay to the city for central services, and we're seeing cuts in our budget so that the city can buy a fire engine and do what they just recently did, which is employ more people for other things other than parks. Well, we had to cut our parks staffing. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank both of you candidates and for just stepping up and being volunteers to this fine city. I want to thank the RVTV crew, and also I want to thank all those who are watching. All right.